So today's topic is launching a series of podcasts for the next few weeks about which we're going to get into the more philosophical elements of what it means to be an artist in today's world. What exactly is the role of an artist, and how can we live that role out with integrity as we seek to serve our audiences, whoever those people are in whatever sphere they are, and make the world a better, more unified place. So this is a topic with many, many facets, which is why we're doing a series on it over the next few weeks on the podcast. And it is one that I am very passionate about and have been speaking and writing about for a very long time. Going back several years now, when I realized personally for myself that I had to dig deeper into my reasons for being an artist and for being a singer and for being a performer, to maintain that connection, not only with the art that I make, but with the people that I am serving. That was a revelation to me as as I worked through certain struggles that I had, because as we all know, music careers, and especially in the classical music world and the classical singing world, they come with lots of challenges and lots of obstacles. We face a lot of stuff that is inherent to a music career that is really hard. There are a lot of difficulties, and we need to know what keeps us going in order to persevere in this career. We need to know what anchors us and what that deeper why and that intrinsic motivation is. So these are all topics that we're going to be discussing in the next couple of weeks. But today I wanted to kind of zoom out and talk more broadly about the role of an artist in today's world. So our topic today is the role of artists in a divided world. And I want to be upfront right now at the outset and just say that this podcast is not meant to be political. It is not meant to speak to the politics of the day or the certain current events that are happening right now. These are ideas and principles and things that I have stood behind for a very long time. They are not affected by the current climate. And I believe that they will help to open a conversation that is really important for us to be having right now about the purpose of art and how we can continue to reach people, but how that entails getting in touch with ourselves as artists first, and understanding the principles that undergird the things that undergird the art that we make and undergird the message that we want to put out into the world. So this is not meant to be interpreted through the lens of any particular political position or ideological position. It is not meant to take a side. It is not meant to offer commentary on anything specific. It is, again, zooming out and looking at the role of the artist in today's divided world, because unity is a very important value for me. I believe that art is ultimately for bridge building and not for division. And I think that there are ways that we can look at, or ways that we can approach and reframe what we do as artists to help toward those ends, because I believe that the world is going to be a better place the more that we strive for unity and the more that we try to build bridges instead of walls with our art. Okay, so with that disclaimer out of the way, that this is not about politics or specific events or social issues, let's get into it. So I want to draw some parallels here that might make this feel, a bit more concrete to someone who might be listening and they're like, well, how does this relate to being a performer or being a singer or being a voice teacher, or whatever it is that you do as an artist? So I'm going to just, talk about my experience as a voice teacher here, especially back when I worked with younger students. So I don't work with young students anymore. I work exclusively with adults now. But back when I worked with young voice students, so middle school, high school, sometimes even, elementary school age, especially those who were singing musical theater, which many of them were, I would say almost all of them were, I would ask my students in their lessons what their songs were about, right? So, every teacher asks this question of their students. And when I would ask this, a lot of them would kind of like launch into this big full-on plot synopsis of, what the character had just done, what they were about to do as a result of, XYZ having happened in the numbers that preceded the song that they are singing in the show. All of this, book report style sort of plot synopsis thing. And, don't get me wrong, because I was glad that they had done their homework. Like, I was glad that they knew this information. I think that, a lot of voice teachers who work with students of this age group, they have also worked with students who have no idea what their song is about or who their character is or what the larger context is surrounding their music. So certainly there are students who don't know all of that and don't care to know. So I was glad that they know, or glad that they knew. But what I was after with them when I would ask them, what is your song about, was not just a plot summary, because what I was really after was the human issue, the human nature issue, the more fundamental thing that underlies both the plot thread and the character's situation in that particular song. Because it is these human nature things, these more fundamental things, rather than the specific circumstances that the character might be facing, those underlying things are the things that allow the art to speak to people and resonate with people on a wider scale. So when I say human nature things or fundamental things, what I mean is, is the song about loss? Is it about love? Is it an identity shift of some kind for the character? Is it about revenge? Is it about standing up to injustice? Is it about, growing up? Is it about ending a relationship, right? Think of all the songs across musical theater, like even the really, really popular ones that you hear sung over and over again. They all are about something that speaks to human nature. And so we have to get a little bit, we have to think a little bit more deeply to figure out what this human thing is sometimes, because we can get wrapped up in the technical details. We can get wrapped up in the musical stuff. We can get wrapped up in the text itself, which is important. But it again, the text is a vehicle, right? For the human thing, right? The music is a vehicle for the human thing. So we need to ask ourselves what that thing is. And then once we know what it is, or what we believe it to be, we have to ask ourselves, how can we present the art in such a way that it can speak to that thing so completely that anyone who has experienced that thing on some level can resonate with it, right? Rather than presenting it in a way that speaks only to the particular circumstances of the character. Okay, so I'm going to give you some concrete examples, since we're talking about students who sing musical theater, right? Here's just some examples from that world. So, think of Defying Gravity, right? Which is an amazing song. I think it's a very well composed song. We don't resonate with Defying Gravity, though, because we are Elphaba, right? We don't resonate with Defying Gravity because we have magical powers, or because we have green skin, or because our bestie is a girly person who loves pink and she wants to climb the social ladder, right? Those are probably not our specific circumstances. That's not why we resonate with the song. We resonate with it because the character Elphaba has come to the conclusion that she cannot remain silent anymore in the face of injustice, and she has decided that, despite feeling misunderstood and feeling, a sense of prejudice toward her, that she will do whatever is necessary, whatever she believes is necessary to take a stand, right? That's what makes us resonate with the song. Or, think about something completely different. Like, I love Sweeney Todd. I love Sondheim. And I think that Sweeney Todd's epiphany it blows your mind listening to some of the music in this show and some of the other things that Sondheim has wrote. And, it doesn't speak to us because we know what it's like to be a barber who has been wrongfully accused of a crime and then exiled. And then he returns to his hometown and he's so maniacally possessed by revenge that he wants to murder the judge who ruined his life, right? Again, we don't know that experientially. That's not why the music speaks to us. It speaks to us because we have all seen Or at the very least, we have learned from history, the very terrible things that can happen when a demonically evil spirit, vengeful spirit, takes up residence in a person and reigns unchecked in a person. That is why it speaks to us, because we see him becoming unhinged on stage. And we understand what that means, not his circumstances. Same thing with Jean Valjean's soliloquy in Les Mis after he encounters the bishop, right? And the bishop doesn't turn him into the authorities, despite that he has just stolen some silver candlesticks from the bishop. We don't resonate with him because we also are like hardened convicts, who served a long sentence in a labor camp for committing petty theft, right? We resonate with it because we know what it's like to feel shame, to feel guilt, to feel bitterness, as well as whatever that emotion that you feel when someone treats you like far more magnanimously than you deserve, right? So those are all just some examples from musical theater that illustrate, I hope, the point that I'm trying to make here, which is that the songs aren't about what the songs are about. The songs are about human nature things. And this is true of any art. It is true of any vocal art, any musical art. It is true of all art forms. Whether you are a singer or an instrumentalist or a dancer or a visual artist, a content creator, even an entrepreneur who is in an arts adjacent space. No matter what kind of artist you are, that thing that you create, that art that you make, that is a vehicle for expressing human condition truths that ultimately point to higher, more transcendent things. So yes, like art is created in a time and in a place. And sometimes, yes, it even has a specific story to go with it. But we always have to be thinking more deeply. What is underneath that surface level narrative? And how can we go beyond the obvious context of the art and engage with what it's really trying to tell us? So we're communicating, we're communicating things that are larger than us, that are more important than us, that are more important than our specific feelings or circumstances, or even our own beliefs or feelings about the music. Right? We are communicating the stuff that is ensconced within the music. So this is an important idea that I want us to take with us as we continue this discussion today and over the next few weeks on the podcast. So this is why, right, I think that all artists need to be very emotionally intelligent thinkers who understand human nature on a deep, deep level. And, for me, human nature is fascinating to me. I love observing human nature. But I think that all artists need to get really curious about that. We need to get really curious about how the human mind works and how human tendencies work so that we can reach people where they are and speak to people where they are. So we need to be emotionally intelligent thinkers who really understand human nature. And we also need to be unafraid of anchoring ourselves to deeply rooted principles, unchanging principles and unchanging truths and values. And not only that, but we want to be able to understand how these values and principles can coalesce into a coherent worldview, right? A coherent way of approaching the world and approaching the art that you make in that world. So I'm not talking about having stances on particular issues or events or trends. I think that artists should have those opinions, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. I think that they should know what they think about those things, because all of that does inform the art that we make. But I don't think that means that those opinions and those views and those beliefs should always be front and center in the art making. Okay? Because when we present our art to people, it is our values that should come through first and foremost, not necessarily our opinions or our beliefs about specific things happening in the world. Because going back to my young students for a minute who gave me a plot summary instead of, identifying sort of the human nature thing in their music, our world kind of functions the same way. We witness events, we witness trends, we see things come and go. Those things are like the plot summaries of our lives, right? They're the things that happen. But our lives, as individuals and collectively, our lives are not about these things. They are ultimately about what the things mean to us. And what they mean to us should be based on us. It should be based on our beliefs, our values, our, spirituality, our experiences. Our lives are not about the things. They are about what the things mean. And we need to know what they mean to us and why they mean that to us. So the views and the opinions that we have about them need to be based in values and principles that undergird the worldview that we claim to have or that we strive to have. So like the reason you believe XYZ about ABC thing over here should be because you hold a belief or a value that compels you to take that stance. Not because that stance is popular, not because everybody else thinks it, not because, you're trying to toe some line. It should be because you have a certain belief or value that compels you to take that stance on that particular issue. So the value or the belief is what is important, not the stance itself necessarily. So again, we're going to talk about this in more detail later. This is important because stances can be motivated by a lot of things, right? That our stances, our opinions can be based on fear. They can be based on self-centeredness or reactivity or vanity, like a desire for a certain image or reputation or something like that. Someone can take a stance for any of these reasons. But these are not strong stances. They're ultimately very flimsy because often, if we take a stance for any of those reasons, we're not able to defend it when we're called to account for it because it's not rooted in something deep. It's rooted in like feelings or emotions rather than something that is that is unchanging or more universal and more anchoring, right? Something that can connect it to the rest of reality. So I think that this idea, right, to again bring this back to art making, this idea has implications for every single artist who wants to impact people with their work. And that's most artists. That's like virtually all artists. It's like why we're doing it on some level, all of us. If we know that our art communicates truths that are more fundamental than simply sort of like the surface level context, then we have to then realize that those truths are what need to come through in our presentation of that art. So that means that our opinions, our views, our stances on circumstances, on trends, on events, they need to kind of take a back seat if we want to communicate the true message of what we are presenting. Okay, again, I'm not saying artists shouldn't have stances on things. And we're going to, again, talk about stances later on those things. But fundamental truths, deeper things is what we are after when we communicate things to our audiences. And I wish that this was a thing that more artists would realize because I see a lot of individual performers, performing arts organizations, or like artists, entrepreneurs, and influencers like on the internet who have arts adjacent businesses and things like that. I see a lot of them using their platform sort of as just a place to share their own feelings or their own stances on things, or they use their platforms as a place to sort of like process their emotions in real time about the things that are affecting them. And I don't think that any of these are really the right move. Okay. I'm not judging anyone who is doing that. Everyone has their reasons, and I'm not judging the content that anyone creates or the stances that anyone takes. But I think that, again, we need to approach this in an emotionally intelligent way. And we need to approach it from a place of, I am an artist who serves an audience, right? I'm an artist who serves people. What do my people need? There is also the question of what do you need as the artist? That is also important. And we're going to talk about that in subsequent weeks as well. There is that sense of like, you need to fill your own artistic cup and your own creative cup if you hope to reach people, right? But we want to always be thinking about the people that we are making art for. Because if we choose to be an artist and we choose to share that art publicly, If we choose, to get up there on a stage or get behind a camera or in front of a camera rather, and, share what we do, that means that we are now entering a dynamic where it is an us and audience dynamic. It is no longer something we are doing just for ourselves. If we wanted to do art just for ourselves, we would do it in our homes, in our living rooms, in our bedrooms, where no one could see it but us. But if we want to share it with people, we now have to consider and remember that other people are now part of the equation. And anything that we do as artists, whether that thing is for a living, that makes us money, or it is just for personal enrichment and for creating impact, whatever that is, whatever the reasons for sharing art publicly, we have to remember that it is not just about us. It is not only about us. So that's what we're talking about here. So I'm going to go through sort of like the different categories of things and how we can work as individual artists, as performing arts organizations, and as artist entrepreneurs to think about this aspect of service and the idea of the performer audience dynamic, and the ways that we can reach our audience where they are at. So we've already talked all about moving beyond sort of the surface level context, looking at the deeper truths, etc. Because if you are an individual performing artist, that is like our first category here, and you perform as a solo artist in whatever genre, you know that audiences are not touched or reached by mere circumstances, right? They are moved by the truths that are reflected inside of those things. So here are two things that I want solo performing artists or individual performing artists to consider. When you get up on stage, you have a job to do. And that job is to serve and connect with the audience that is in front of you. So your audience is there to be reached, to be touched, to be spoken to be changed or impacted. So that means, again, that it is not about you and your beliefs. It is about them. So using a performance to center your own opinions, especially if those opinions are about various trends or current events or politics or temporary things, fleeting things, right? That is making it about you. That is not making it about the audience. It's like the equivalent of showing up to a party where you immediately start talking about yourself and your opinions to a room full of strangers, right? That is rude and off-putting and antisocial behavior, and we shouldn't do that. So that's the first thing. The second thing for individual solo performing artists, this also means, I think, that you cannot use your performance as an opportunity to process your own emotions in real time in front of your audience, right? So everybody, whether we are professional artists or not, I think all of us have used music to process difficult emotions or negative emotions at one time or another in our lives. And that is a really good thing to do. We should do that. That is one of the things that art can help us to do. But again, if we are serving an audience, if we are up there sharing music with people, that is not the job. The job is serving the audience and connecting with the audience. So if you want to use music to process whatever is happening inside you internally, then you need to do that in private, not in public on stage in front of people. It can be done in your own practice time, your performance prep time, whatever. Because think again, like how this would feel to someone in a non-musical context. You run into a stranger or acquaintance somewhere, and like out of nowhere, they just start like dumping their feelings on you. That's weird. That's awkward and inappropriate. Don't do that. Okay, so that's individual performing artists. We want to make sure that we are there to serve the audience and change the audience, and that we are not using our platform as a way to process our unprocessed emotions in front of people. All right, now moving on to performing arts organizations. I think that, and I mean this in the best possible way, I think that arts organizations need to move away from highly politicized or politically charged programming. And by politics, I more mean that as a very blanket term, because politics is actually a very specific thing. But I mean like the sort of like overall political, social, like whatever climate stuff is going on. And I think that there are a lot of reasons that this kind of shift away from that would be important. But here are just, a couple of things, again, to consider. So going back to what we actually communicate, again, right? Relatable human condition truths that point to higher transcendent things. So it's not simply about specific events or circumstances or trends. So of course, there are certain pieces of music that were conceived with specific events or political things in mind, or social movements in mind, right? But again, sometimes those things are in the very distant past, right? But we recognize that those things are still relevant to us today somehow. So why is it relevant? It is because whatever those things represented when they happened are the human truths, the human condition truths that we should be expressing. So again, it is not about the event, it is about what the event means. So even music that is about specific things, we are meant to look at what is underneath that, what undergirds that, and communicate that to the audience. And the second thing is that I think as artists, we should be seeking to reach as many people as possible with our work. Some people might disagree with that. But here's what I mean by that. This does not mean that everybody will like it or resonate with it. Your art is not for everyone, in the sense that it's not going to be everyone's preference. It's not going to be everyone's aesthetic, their aesthetic preference or whatever. And that is fine. But that's also not the point, right? The point is not to make everybody like you. The point is to invite people into your world. And then those people can choose whether or not they would like to enter. They can choose whether or not they would like to continue to engage with the art that you make. And we cannot be inviting if our artistic choices are from the outset designed to exclude people. So there is a difference between creating art that resonates with like-minded individuals and creating art that is meant from the outset to be divisive and inflammatory and demonize people. So we need to be aiming for this over here rather than this, because we want to build bridges, not walls. Okay, and then on to our third category, which is artist entrepreneurs. So this means content creators, influencers, people in arts adjacent businesses like voice studios, coaches, and things like that. I have lots of thoughts about what it means to be an entrepreneur and an influencer, since I am one. I think that even though the word influencer tends to bring up a lot of negative connotations for people, it is actually a very serious thing that requires a lot of self-awareness and deep work to be able to do well and to do ethically. But that is, again, something we're going to dive more into detail in subsequent podcasts. So all artist entrepreneurs and influencers need to make sure that they are communicating the value of their work, right? That's that's sort of like artistic marketing 101. Like, what is the value of the work that you provide, whatever that work is? And you have to make sure that you are communicating that value, not only practically what it gives someone, but also the principles that underlie it, and how those principles align with the value of the audience that you're trying to reach. Right? So if you are marketing your services or creating content for people to consume, you want to make sure that everything that you do is connected and anchored to that deeper why, that intrinsic motivation, and that you also have in mind the audience that you are trying to reach and the values that are important to them. So I believe that influencers and entrepreneurs, they should not be using their platforms as a place to just kind of dump all of their opinions and their views about things, or as a place to work through their emotions in real time in front of the audience that they serve, right? Kind of like the performer that we talked about, the individual solo artist, right? We should not trauma dump on our audience, and we should not just center ourselves all the time if we are in a position of service, which as artists and entrepreneurs, we all are. Um, and you know, I see a lot of like arts entrepreneurs in their content and in their email newsletters that I receive from various folks. They're constantly using phrases alluding to like, you know, the state of the world and like the world is on fire and stuff in their content. And I see a lot of content like this. It lands in my social media feed. It lands in my email inbox. And you know, honestly, sometimes it starts to feel a little bit tiresome. And I say that with lots of love because I understand what some of these service providers are trying to do. They're trying to express solidarity probably with their clients or their audiences. And that is not a bad thing, right? We want to keep in mind, again, the values of the audience that we're serving. And I also don't think that everyone is doing it to be divisive or to be inflammatory or to have like an agenda of some kind. But I also don't think that constantly obliquely hinting at the world's present difficulties like this is actually a very useful thing to do. And here's why. First of all, it's not specific. You're not being specific about what you mean. And something vague like that really serves no one. So just to say something like, I know the world feels like it's on fire, that's, I don't see how that's actually concretely helpful or clear about anything. It also just like assumes that people are going to know what you're talking about, which if there was one thing that I have learned from creating content on the internet for the past few years is like, you can't assume anything about how people are going to receive it. You can have the best of intention putting something out there, and there will always be people who don't understand it and who willfully misunderstand it. So you can't just assume that people are going to know what you are talking about or know what you are alluding to. And saying vague things like that is not actionable. It is not helpful. It is not inspiring. It also kind of just assumes that everyone in your audience agrees with you on the thing that you're not even being clear about, that you're alluding to, that they're not even sure what it is. But assuming that everybody agrees with you is just a problem in and of itself, which I'm not even going to get into that. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I think that constantly talking about how hard things are and what the crisis du jour is, even if it's like very like oblique or indirect, that is only going to make people stay focused on how hard things are. It is only going to make them stay focused on the crisis thing. And that should not be the goal. Because if you are an artist entrepreneur, you are a leader and you are an influencer, right? Whether you like it or not. And your job as a leader and an influencer is to call people higher and inspire them and to help them lift themselves out of the difficulties that they are experiencing, not to say stuff that's going to keep them mired in, you know, all the crisis and the hard stuff that is going on by constantly sort of like obliquely referencing it. I also think that this kind of rhetoric, you know, tends to enable like really unhelpful, like unproductive inward looking behaviors rather than helping people kind of get out of themselves and figure out how they can better serve people with whatever they're doing. And, you know, again, similar to the performing artist, right? We don't want to be using our platforms as, you know, vehicles to process our own emotions in real time in front of our audiences. Again, we are meant to lead and influence in an ethical way. That means that we need to do all of that processing and, you know, navigating of our own emotions. Like that is important work to do. It is really important work to do, but it is work that you need to do in private, in whatever sort of context that works for you. Not in front of your wider audiences. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be vulnerable in front of our audiences, but there is a line between vulnerability that is appropriate and vulnerability that is inappropriate and will make people feel uncomfortable. Okay. So we don't want to use platforms as influencers as a place to process when we have not done that work for ourselves separately or privately. Or they just want to use their platforms as a place for activism. And again, like activism is great. Activism can be noble and admirable, and the world needs activism. But I believe that activism is, you know, best reserved for like real concrete action taken in the world, right? Not just sort of like pontificating your ideas and your opinions on the internet. And also consider the fact that, you know, again, you are reaching a specific audience with the content that you create and the services that you provide. And they may or may not care about your activism. Remember, you're there to serve your audience. If your activism is important to you, then by all means do that in your life in another sphere. But if it does not have anything to do with the brand that you have created and the art that you make and the audience that you serve, then maybe, talking about that activism on your marketing platforms isn't really the right match, right, for your audience. We want to, again, consider what is going to be clear to our audience and relevant to them. And how do we serve them knowing that information? And lastly, I think that people in general, the public, right, they open social media or they open their email or they turn on their televisions or their radios, and they are already inundated with negativity from everywhere, from every side, every time they open social media or turn on the news or whatever. So what they are seeking, from their favorite influencers or their favorite thought leaders is inspiration and insight. Probably not content that is going to keep them riding on the negativity hamster wheel, right? Your audience is probably not sitting there like on the edge of their seat waiting for you to post your latest take on every single current event, because they probably already have their own opinions anyway, and they have their favorite news sources anyway. So what we should be doing is seeking to inspire them and lift them higher and get them out of themselves so that they can do good in the world, so that they can be inspired to serve people in whatever way that is for them. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that despite all of this, this does not mean that I don't think artists should take stances on things, because they should. In fact, I encourage artists to take stances and to understand why they hold those stances and what the values are that undergird them, because all of that informs the art that you make. But when we take a stance on something and we consider whether we want to air that stance publicly, I think we want to keep a few things in mind. So first is that, is it really necessary for us to voice our opinion on a particular issue? Because again, not all opinions or views or takes need to be expressed publicly. There are many things that I care about and many opinions I have that I do not express publicly because they are not aligned with the audience that I serve, and they are not aligned with the brand that I have built. That does not mean that those opinions are not important to me and my worldview, right? But it is not important for me to express those opinions, those particular opinions, to my audience. Not every opinion you have needs to be made public. It is perfectly fine to have an opinion about something and to keep it to yourself, unless someone asks you about it. And then you can talk about how you feel about it. Secondly, when you are considering whether to publicize your opinion about something, again, think about how this is going to impact the people that you serve. Is your opinion relevant to their concerns, to their needs, to their desires, to their goals? Is it something that they expect from you? Does it align with the art that you make, or the service that you provide, or the brand that you've built, or whatever? If the answer is no, then it's probably better to say nothing. I think that we also need to be careful that we are not taking stances just because we are afraid of getting canceled. Okay. I don't think that we should be voicing opinions about things just so that we can have others perceive us in a certain way. I also don't think we should be doing it for, so-called shock value. That's like not productive usually. And it's like not an integrity move usually. I think we also need to remember that others may feel differently than us. So if we choose to express that opinion, we need to recognize that other people also have opinions that they are free to express, and those opinions may differ from ours. They may have an entirely different worldview from you. So when we encounter people like this on the internet, right, we want to be strong in what we believe, but recognizing that our job is not to alienate them or to demonize them or other them for their opinion. That is not ethical leadership. Ethical leadership is taking a stand and planting a stake somewhere. Unethical leadership is saying that you're a garbage human because your opinions don't match mine, which is a lot of what you see on the internet these days. And again, finally, I think that ultimately, again, we need to remember that the stance is not really about the stance. The stance is about the values that undergird it. So again, in the same way that your art is not just about the context or the circumstances that surround it, but about, deeper and more fundamental things, our opinions and views about specific things are not about those things. They speak instead to the principles and the values that we hold. And if you cannot identify or articulate what the values are that underline your stances, it probably means you have not dug deeply enough to determine why you actually believe what you say you do. So before voicing your opinion about something, you better make sure that opinion is rooted in something coherent and consistent. Because ultimately, I think that artists should be seeking to build bridges and not walls. We need to be bridge builders, not wall builders. And if we are building walls with our art, we are working at cross purposes with the craft that we have spent years developing and honing and practicing and refining. Because we all got into this for a reason, right? We all got into it because we wanted to share music with people, share art with people, and make an impact with people, on people rather, through our music or whatever art it is that we create. And if you put up a wall in front of that, what does that do for people? What does that do for you? It isolates you from the people that you can serve and from the impact that you can make. We cannot impact through a wall. We can walk across a bridge and meet someone on the other side. Whether or not that person wants to engage with us is their choice and their issue. But we need to make the overture. We need to make the invitation. That is why we are there. So if we are constantly making our art about us and centering our own feelings and our own beliefs, like our own stances on things in the art, rather than trying to reach our audiences, we're not going to draw anyone in, or we're going to draw very few people in. But if we're seeking to build bridges and walk across the bridge to the person on the other side and share art with them with the intention of impacting them and offering something to them that we believe could change their lives, we are harnessing our craft's true power and potential. All that stuff that we have spent years building, the technique and the musicianship and the, all of the technical stuff that surrounds it. We're harnessing all of that toward the true purpose and the true power of art, using it for good. Again, that doesn't mean that everyone's going to like it. Not everyone has to like it. Not everyone will like it, but that's not the point. We should not aim to people please, but we should always keep our audiences in mind when we present our art, because it is ultimately not about us. It is about what we can do for other people. So that is what I have for you on the podcast today. So I thank you for tuning in, for engaging here on the Substack. And again, over the next few weeks, you can expect more podcasts every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern that go live. There will be replays available. And we are, for the next few weeks, discussing these more philosophical, zooming out about the purpose of art and being an artist in today's world. So I thank you for tuning in today. I hope that you will tune in on subsequent weeks and share the podcast and share the clips with people who you think need to hear it. So I hope you all have a fantastic week, and I will see you soon.